I don't wish the NICU on anybody unless you work there. But I also want people to know, like, it was the most traumatic experience of our life, but it was the best experience because of the care we received.
Welcome to the Voices of Experience podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and insightful conversations from the heart of Tampa General Hospital. With our host, Amber Washington. Together, you'll explore the impact of patient and family voices on healthcare innovation and patient-centered care. Stay tuned as we dive into today's episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Whether you're a healthcare professional, a patient, or simply passionate about making a difference, this podcast is for you. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode on the Voices of Experience podcast. My name is Amber Washington, and today I have the wonderful pleasure of speaking with the one and only Kim Park and her lovely husband, Justin Park. Kim and Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank
you
you.
for having us.
So some of you all may know there's like a running joke at TGH that some of the leaders of our organization come from Boston, and these two actually come from Boston themselves. And so I'm going to allow Kim and Justin to give a little bit of introduction about where they're from and how they ended up at TGH.
In November of 2019, we ended up moving down here from Boston. I was pregnant with our first son, just newly married, and I ended up finding a new OBGYN, thinking it's first pregnancy. This is going to be great. We have a new house. And then we ended up at TGH.
And Justin, was that a scary experience for you coming down, moving into a new city and getting pregnant with your little one?
It was a big jump for us to just pack up and go, and I'm thankful we did it.
Yeah, so for some of you may be familiar with Kim and Justin's story, and we wanted to bring them on the podcast, of course, the PFAC podcast, because this is all about the patient voice. And so they have been really integrated within our health system and really been advocates for others. But their story took a little bit of a turn when they came here to Tampa General. And so I want you guys to talk about what happened to give the listeners an opportunity to learn your story.
I never felt good the entire pregnancy. I just assumed this is pregnancy. It's our first time being pregnant. And I was just miserable. I was not going to be the girl bopping around Target, taking photos every week, being like, look at me. I felt awful. And once I got here and we started doing everything to the house and things, it kind of started to decline even worse. I was not feeling well to the point I would go lay down in the room and I was supposed to be working. And I finally reached out and said, yeah, I don't really feel well. My chest started bothering me one night and I stayed up like literally all night. I sat in the recliner. I put pillows behind me in the chair and everything. And it felt like a frog was in my throat. And I like literally couldn't breathe. And when I woke up that morning, I said, something's like, this isn't right. And I called and said, I need to be seen today. And I went in. My husband was like 2 hours away at work. And I drove there, which wasn't far at the time where we were going. And when I got in there, they were like, you need to go to TGH. They have a NICU. And I was 26 weeks pregnant.
Wow. And fun fact about me, I also moved to Tampa pregnant. So I understand that fear of coming to establish new care, right? You think everything is going well. And in your case, you moved here, thought everything was fine, had those symptoms, and then they said you have to go to a NICU, right? And for those listening, NICU stands for Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. So if you're wondering what that means, if you're not familiar with healthcare, essentially it's for young children who have to receive intensive care once they're born. And so can you elaborate a little bit more what that experience was like once your baby was born at 26 weeks?
27. So I went in to TGH at 26 weeks. They initially thought I was in heart failure with preeclampsia symptoms. So one, that was scary for me. And then two, what about our son? While we were at TGH and were admitted, they also found he was IUGR, which we had never known about or heard about, which is intrauterine growth restriction.
Hmm.
And that was found in the first ultrasound we did have at TGH. So it was a lot to digest in 24 hours of, wow, this is happening. Like, I'll never forget that first morning waking up. I had a doctor sit at the end of the bed, and they literally were like, you're not leaving this hospital till you have your son. And we're going to try to get you to 34 weeks. And I like lost it. Even now, like, I know who it was sitting at the edge of the bed. And I was like, so I'm not leaving this hospital. I'm not going home to my new home. I'm not going home to my dog. I'm not going home to my husband. Like, this is really serious.
It became real life real quick. Yeah. So Justin, as we're talking through this story from a father's perspective, a lot of times in healthcare, well, in general, right, we think about pregnancy and we automatically think about mom because she's carrying. But I'm sure emotions were running through your head as well. When Kim called you probably and said, I have to stay here, they are saying these things are going on with our child, what was kind of going through your head at that moment?
So I was working all the way in Anna Maria, and she called me, and I was like, do you want me to leave right now and meet you? She's like, no, just wait, we'll see. And then I ended up just going right to the hospital from there 2 hours later. And from there, they rushed her to TGH, and then I followed, and that was it. I mean, it's a crazy experience.
When she went to TGH, did they deliver him then, or did you have to wait for a little bit before that happened?
Yeah, so we were in the 24/7 labor delivery. They wanted to try and get us to 32 to 34 weeks. At the time, I was 26 weeks. We had to have monitoring the whole time. They were trying to get some of the fluid off of me. I lost like 10 pounds in a night from the preeclampsia, and I was not in heart failure. It was just so much fluid had built around my heart. It was giving those symptoms. My blood pressure was not going to go down. So I was on 24/7 monitoring care. We were hoping to get there, but they brought in the NICU, and we had signed paperwork for C-section, emergency C-section, then talked through that process at a high level of this could happen. And then 6 days later, I was all of a sudden flying back on a table, and they were like, we need to give you an emergency C-section to save both your lives. As they're telling me that, they're putting my husband in a bunny suit, and he looks white as a ghost. And I'm like, okay.
So once you're in the OR and you're kind of going through it, talk a little bit about that experience because you were there with her during that. So I would like for you to both talk about kind of how that was and then that transition from out the OR to the NICU, because essentially your lives changed forever because you thought you were going to have a baby up until at least viable term, essentially in terms of full term, I should say. But now you're giving birth to someone, a baby at 27 weeks. You probably didn't prep with clothes and knowing the ins and outs of what it's like to have a child that little, essentially, and fighting for his life. So talk about a little bit that transition from the OR to the NICU. What was that like?
Everything you had planned in your pregnancy was gone. It was out the window.
Yeah.
That's just reality. It was save me and save our child, and we'll figure this out, was basically what it was. Emergency C-section was a little rough. The epidural wasn't great for me just because of my back and things. I had trouble. And then knowing like, this is it, like, hopefully he cries, 1, and 2, then we adjust from there. And then hopefully I can recover from everything that was going on to my body. But he cried and he peed on everyone. And I was like, okay, you go with him. And that was kind of like, I'll be fine. Like, I need you to go with him, even though I knew like I did not feel fine.
Yeah.
But I felt like we were in the best position and in the right place. And there was a reason why we moved here that I could say that confidently, say, please just go with him and I'll be okay. Like, there was a lot of people in the room at that time. And when they left, it was like, wow, I'm not going to hold my son. Like, I'm on a table right now. And I remember looking to there was a guy and a woman to the left in anesthesia. And I was like, I don't feel good right now. And they're like, oh, okay. And I was like, okay, now I'm feeling my symptoms because I was on like a kind of like a rush of everything happening, and they handled that. I don't remember the first time I saw my husband. I think it was in recovery because I was really sick for the first 26 hours. I was not really with it, but I knew people visited me in recovery, but I was having a hard time.
Wow. And what's your son's name now?
Carter with a K. Carter with the K in that here. 1 pound, 10 ounces, 12 inches. I was in recovery, but I did not go to the NICU or hold him for the first 26 hours just due to my condition.
Right. And once he's in the NICU, you followed him there and kind of saw that process through. What was kind of the things that the providers were kind of telling you guys at this point? What was kind of those thoughts or plan, in a sense, for Carter at that point?
Well, it was just a whirlwind because I showed up after work one night. It was unbelievable. I did not expect that. They couldn't find Carter's heart rate. So they came in and they were like, we need to deliver him right now for both his health and Kimberly's health.
Wow. And so now transitioning, now you guys are officially NICU parents, right? And you guys kind of got that title. And in a sense, you're now integrated into the health system for a while because you were waiting for Carter to get to a point where he can go home. With that, talk about a little bit those NICU visits and how that transition was, the support, the care, coming back and forth to the NICU, and then graduation day for Carter. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so in the NICU was like, you jump in a swimming pool, you just dive in. There is no like, here's a manual, here's what's happening. It's wild. I don't wish the NICU on anybody unless you work there. But I also want people to know, like, it was the most traumatic experience of our life, but it was the best experience because of the care we received. The NICU became our village. I had him on a Wednesday. I was discharged on a Saturday, and my husband went back to work on a Monday.
Wow.
And I quit my job and decided, like, my focus was going to be make sure our son lives. I chose for my own health to visit every day and go home at night to be with our house, our family, our dog, and try and sleep and not have that be a 24/7. That was a personal decision. I think it was the best for us, for our family. But every NICU story, there's no one NICU story that's the same. We are 100%. Every NICU parent is 100% different story. No one's ever going to be the same. It's the craziest traumatic experience that no NICU experience is ever the same. He went back to work and I pumped every night, thankfully for the nurses and the support that they said, you want to pump or you don't want to pump? And I felt like pumping was the only thing I could control in the entire situation. So I choose to pump and go in every day and bring milk, and TGH just became my work. Even my phone would say, oh, you're going to work. Like, that's funny. I quit my job, but sure, TGH is my work. And, I was greeted by Mauricio every day almost in the valet, and it became home. It was home, and thankfully they all helped us get home, really.
Yeah. It's funny because when people enter the health system, they're not just coming for the care or to visit a loved one. They're encountering every component of the health system. So you mentioned the valet worker, right? Going through there, meeting him every day, seeing him, having a friendly face, that was a sense of warmth for you. And I think a lot of times we kind of overlook that component because we focus on, which these people are vital, right? Our nurses, our providers, our physicians, those individuals are very important to a health system, but so are the valet workers, the EVS workers, the dietary team. And so I'm glad you mentioned that component because I think we kind of forget they're a part of our village too when we're coming to the health system. So talk a little bit more now. Carter's back home, and what was that transition like caring for such a small child? And now he's 4 now? 5. Wow. So talk about kind of how that journey was, because he's developing a little bit different than a child that would have been born at a later stage.
Yeah, so we knew the NICU did prep us the whole time we were in the NICU. We had eye doctors coming in, heart doctors, everything that you could think of. We were kind of on that whole schedule. So we knew, thankfully, we feel like as a NICU child, we were very blessed and we weren't as severe as there are some NICU stories. And we spent 83 days in the NICU, including the COVID lockdown. But I felt we were prepared to leave knowing we had set up all those cardio eye doctor appointments to continue. So you're now bringing home a child that needs more medical attention than a normal newborn. Being discharged with the nurse's help, felt confident we could do it. And we just, as long as we went to those appointments and continued them, that at some point we would also graduate those appointments. He graduated cardio last year, thankfully. So we're kind of pretty much, it feels like after 4 years of different various appointments, we've graduated all those steps.
Wow. Well, that's a testament to Carter. So kudos to him and his challenge and really being persevering. And a lot of times, me having a child myself, I see development. And I'm like, man, kids are resilient, right? I mean, he went through a traumatic experience even with his own body and having to grow and really develop differently. And then having you all as parents support that. But I think it's very commendable to hear the work that you all put in to really help Carter get to where he's at. And I've had the privilege of meeting Carter, so I know he's a really cool kid. Honestly, you wouldn't even know that he was a NICU baby. But soon after that, though, you have 2 other little ones running around. So talk a little bit about that, because a lot of times parents might think, oh, you went through such a traumatic experience, and now you have a set of twins. Talk a little bit more about your baby girls.
We did. We waited till Carter was 2. We talked about it and said, are we prepared for this to happen again? At that point, I was seeing myself, my own medical care after Carter, that, there is a very high chance this can happen again and it could never happen again. So we waited till he was 2. We felt more confident when he had hit certain levels of different weight and things and doctors. Then, okay, let's start trying. And then we ended up having girl twins. And I'll never forget that it was again during COVID time. I went to the first appointment. I was trying to have a more natural birth again. And they said, oh, do you see what I see? And I said, yeah, it's twin. And they said, yeah, you're going to have to go back to TGI. And I said, okay, I'm okay with that. Because then I was like, I already know the whole NICU stuff and they feel like family. And I was like, hey, we'll probably see you guys. And this time we're prepared and we know what the NICU entails. And that, it's not like a complete shock. But we ended up having the twins. I was seen by a cardiologist my entire pregnancy and our regular high-risk OBGYN at CGH and USF. And I ended up going 36 and 5 with a scheduled C-section. And no NICU time. Other than car seat tests, which was just regulated. And that was it. It was pretty wild.
Imagine going from essentially, right, a birth that you thought was going to be natural. It was one child, first off, right? You thought it was going to be a natural, it's your first. Oh, everything's going to kind of be fine in a sense. Then you have this like shock, right? They have a NICU child and then you get pregnant again. There's twins. Basically, they're totally opposite in all ways, in a sense, which is really cool. I really wanted to bring you guys on the podcast because you have unique perspectives in a lot of ways, because you're a family of a NICU baby and then you had twins afterwards, and both of those are very unique experiences. So would you say that your twin birth for the most part felt normal, or did you have any challenges during that time as well?
It was a little challenging. I was born with a heart condition and then preeclampsia with Carter. So that posed a very much higher risk for myself. Thankfully, I had Daniela Crucelat, doctor, as my OBGYN / cardio team that worked with MFN. So that was like, unheard of. I went a lot, like once a week. Type appointments towards the end. But it was also more of like the birth, I think. Whereas Carter was an emergency C-section. I kind of went into having the twins. This is a planned C-section. And then I ended up having to be put out for it. And I didn't get to hold the girls and Justin didn't. But full perspective, one of the primary nurses that took care of Carter, Crystal, I knew she was on that day. She knew we were scheduled. Like, do not put me out until she is in this room. And I was like crying. And my doctor was like, I'm so sorry this is happening. And like, because everyone knew our background and our story. And then Crystal just grabbed my hand and she's like, I'm here. It's going to be okay. And Crystal ended up bringing the girls to Justin. So,
wow, you definitely have a TGH village. So that's definitely amazing. And the fact that she was willing to do that for you all, that's family at this point, right? So kudos to Crystal for that. Wow, that's huge. We heard a little bit about your story, but your story didn't stop there. Your name, I know for a fact, buzzes all over TGH. And no offense to you, Justin, it's just Kim's just always there. So she works there. Her phone told her that, remember? But with that being said, Kim, you have been an instrumental part of TGH and PFAC. And so for those that don't know, Kim is the chair of the NICU PFAC as well as the women's. And so we really value the work that you do and really the perspective you bring to TGH. And so I want you to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've done within the NICU through PFAC and then also through your own initiatives.
After having Carter, I decided to share some of our story. We didn't for a long time because we were still trying to go through our own emotions and get through all of that in our every aspect, family, friends, marriage. And thankfully we did have a good village and we felt in a good spot. But I felt like this happened for a bigger reason. And it wasn't just for me to be his mom and to quit my job. It was to have a voice. Yeah. And I decided that I'd rather speak about it than to keep it to myself. And I started realizing on social media, I would say things and people would reach out to me. And I'd get messages from people I've known since like middle school, high school. And I didn't even know they had a NICU child. And they would say, "Thank you for speaking up. I literally can't talk about the experience. I'm that traumatized, but we need people like you." And that's when I knew. I said, okay, I'm a vocal, outgoing person. Like, I can totally do that. And if it's going to help one other person, then I think I should share our story because this is bigger than us.
So I know that through sharing your story, you've been able to go to Tallahassee during We Are TGH Day. And for those who aren't familiar, that is an opportunity where patients of the organization go up to Tallahassee and speak to their legislators about how well TGH has done with their care. And so Kim has had the opportunity to go there and really share her story in that capacity. And from there, she was discovered by one of the leaders at TGH to become part of the PFAC. And so when I initially heard about Kim and I heard about your story, I was very touched. And I actually had just given birth myself to my son, who actually was in the NICU, not at 83 days, but for 4 days. And so, like she said, anytime you're in the NICU, it becomes a different experience, whether it's 1 day or if it's 83 days. But with that, I felt like a connection and I wanted to hear more. And so once you became a part of PFAC, I feel like you went like full blown. And I was like, man, this is like the ideal advisor. Like, this is going to be easy. You became part of new team member orientation. And for those who don't know what that is, Kim tells her story to all of our new team members. And Kim, do you know approximately how many times you've done that?
I think over 10 now. Wow. Within the past 2 years.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple more scheduled this year. I think it's a big deal because there's other people, like my husband's not as big a speaker like I am. But there's people like that can't talk about the NICU journey. They can't talk about what happened to them. And I feel like it did. One, we moved here for a reason, and two, TGH happened for a reason. And my son is alive. I've worked through some of that experience, but it's also been healing for me to do it because I know right now, today, as we're sitting here, there's families going through exactly what we went through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
It's every day. People will work at TGH in the NICU full time because it is a full time thing that's happening every day. So I also wanted to make more advocacy for it to say, hey, I really don't want you to know what the NICU is, but I want you to know there's a NICU.
Right.
Because it affects people every day. It changes your entire life. Your whole life is turned upside down until, you live day by day for a long time.
Yeah, living life on edge a little bit, right? And so, Justin, Kim is telling her story from your perspective and your lens. I'm sure you're a proud husband, proud father, but I want you to kind of talk about your feelings through kind of this transition that happened with Carter and your twins. What were your feelings as all of this was kind of going on, as your life was turning upside down too, while you were working at Anna Marie?
Yeah, that first day it was just like a roller coaster. I didn't expect to just show up, and 2 hours later my son is born. And I'm just thrown in the fire and I don't know what I'm doing here. We were so not prepared for him coming that early. So, and then with the twins, I had a weird premonition. I knew it was going to be twins for some reason. And then, she called me with ultrasound, and I was like, I already knew. So,
I hope you're enjoying today's show as much as I am leading the discussion. Remember to subscribe to stay current on our shows.
So funny. We should make a poll or do something and ask twin parents, like, did one of you all have like some type of feeling if this is going to happen? Yeah. So how old are your girls now?
and now they're 3. They just turned 3. Yeah.
Wow. So 5 and 3. And I had a pleasure in their names, actually.
Kiara and Kyra.
So I've had a pleasure of meeting Kiara and Kyra. Actually, our kids went trick-or-treating together, this past year. And ironically, their family dressed up as, it was not planned. Nope, not at all. So you were Woody.
Yep.
And you were little Bo P. Your girls were Slinky. and Carter was Buzz Lightyear, and my son gets out the car and he's Woody. Ironically, but it worked out perfectly. We're all Toy Story, and so we're walking around the neighborhood, and that was a fun time. And I really embraced you all coming into the PFAC and then really becoming friends in a sense, because we really have grown and you've really embraced my son as well. And I really appreciate that, and including us. And so I want to dive a little bit more into the PFAC, because I can literally write a list of things you've done, Kim, for the PFAC, but I want to highlight a few. And one of them being the NICU frame, the idea that you brought to the organization. Can you talk a little bit about your why behind that? And in the podcast, we'll showcase a picture so they can see as well.
Yeah. So once we had Carter, we weren't really sharing with a lot of people what was happening to us in real lifetime. We were texting certain friends and direct family, but we weren't like on social media or all that. Like back then, there was no TikTok or anything. We were in our emotions, and like we waited a while to even say that he was born, because it was hard. But then I had joined, because I'm on social media, my husband's not. I had joined some like support groups, NICU, and trying to understand these new terms and things, because I'm an accountant. I am not at all in healthcare and in all these acronyms and things. So I had joined a lot of groups, and I had noticed a lot of other hospitals had different things for graduation and different types of things. And yes, we were there during COVID as well, and things were different. But we had nurses take our photos, and we brought our own NICU grad onesies and things like that. And I thought, well, what's something I can give back to the NICU as a family? We could give back to say, hey, this is happening every day. Like kids are going home from the NICU. Like, is there some way we could celebrate them? And I had gotten the idea to do like a selfie frame type thing with the theme of the hospital. And then it could be switched around with different numbers and things for different phrases and have it in different languages. So that's kind of how I came about it, just listening to other parents across the country.
And that's what's so powerful about PFAC. And again, the PFAC is the Patient and Family Advisory Council at TGH, but it's the patient and family voice, right? And so you having a voice came about, brought this idea, and through great partnership within the organization, we were able to get this created. And in a sense, now other families can utilize this tool and take pictures with their kids when they graduate and really have that memory of TGH. So that's really the power of the patient voice. And there's other things that you have done, and one big project being the octopi. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we actually never got an octopi when we were there. They ran out. And I knew that was like a big deal for development and for not pulling the cords. And my son loved to pull the cords. So once we got to a point, I just reached out and was like, does anybody know how to knit or crochet? Like, I can buy you the supplies, but I am not learning. I am not in that stage of my life yet. And I'm not good at it. So I reached out for help and said, can someone help me? And I reached out in our Wesley Chapel like area groups, my own hometown and their senior centers and places. And the response was so overwhelming. People just said, yes, what's the pattern? How many do you need? What color? Like, no questions. And they did it. And since we started it, I think it was about 2 years ago, it's just been continual. It hasn't stopped. And we're so thankful for that, because our goal is every child to have a octopi and always go home with one and not run out, essentially. And we've had people ship them from across the country. I heard your story because my daughter, and she was there, but now we live here, and they just ship them directly to volunteer services. We have different knitting groups in the area in Greater Tampa Bay, and even my own, like I said, back in Massachusetts, our own senior centers, sending it where my parents still live.
Wow, talk about a global reach. Way up there, down in Florida, I think that's very cool and very commendable. I had no idea what an octopi was myself until I heard about the story and really the importance of it. And for a preemie baby, you mentioned about pulling the cords. And if you've never seen one, I'll put a picture here, but it's really a little octopus in a sense. It allows the baby to have something to hold while they're there in the NICU. And so very, very instrumental, and really you're a huge advocate in this community. And I know the work that you're going to do is only going to continue to grow. You have so many ideas, and it's really reshaped the way the NICU is now at TGH. And now we have parents coming onto the PFAC that were a part of the NICU, giving their story and not afraid to do it, because I think sometimes it takes somebody to speak up and then someone else to say, okay, it's okay for me to speak up too. And so Both Kim and Justin are now part of the Patient and Family Advisory Council, and we really, really appreciate their perspectives because not everyone has a NICU child, not everyone are twin parents, not everyone has preeclampsia, right? And not everyone has to be that caregiver. And so you guys bring a lot of different perspectives to the health system. And so some of the projects that you guys are doing within Women's and Children's includes some educational component. We just started a work group for hypertension for moms that you're a part of. And so you've been really well integrated within the health system. And I really want to say thank you in front of the world on the podcast. I know we talk, I'm really appreciative, but deep down, I think what you're doing is just so impactful and a lot of people don't truly understand the impact. So thank you. With that being said, patient voice, right? That's really what this podcast is about. And we heard your perspective in terms of as a patient, what your voice has done for the organization. But now I want you kind of to mention or talk about why that's important.
It's important because, again, there's people that can't speak like me. And I'm speaking for that area of people. A lot of people have preeclampsia. It's not talked about. I've seen it. I saw it on doctor's appointments on a wall, but I never was like, oh, what's preeclampsia? The biggest thing I always knew about was, getting gestational diabetes. It wasn't like, because that's what my mom had. So it wasn't, oh, you could get this and, you could almost die for preeclampsia and literally like have my husband at the end of the bed, like what's happening right now. So I think it's because I do have a voice, I have to be the voice for those that don't and make more awareness. And hopefully that at some point we can find why it happens and give a better background or have someone be more prepared than I was.
Yeah, that's a big part. I never think about that perspective. When someone listens in to hear your voice, now they're like, oh, what can I do to make sure that, in a sense, you're saving their life, right? Justin, from your perspective as a caregiver, why do you think the patient voice is important in this type of environment?
Just like my wife said, I mean, we need to get our story out and hopefully another person will speak up and just go down the line and, just keep on going, and feel like that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it normally does take one person to start and then normally people follow. But the PFAC is very unique because you all can tell your story and then also advise at a higher level and say, because I went through this experience, here are some suggestions on how it can be better for the next patient, right? And I think that's why this is very special because you've done that. You've told your story, you're still telling your story, but then you're also saying, I wasn't able to take a shower in certain areas, but the next mom or dad should be able to. And here's why I wasn't able to. This happened or that happened. And now the organization is aware and they're like, oh, well, let's fix that, right? Or the octopi, like you did, you mentioned Carter pulled the cords, but someone else's child is not pulling the cords now because octopi are there. So I think it's very vital to recognize that value add that the PFAC has and that you all are willing to tell the story and continue telling it. So as we kind of begin to wrap up the podcast, I really want to appreciate you all both for coming on and really telling your story. But is there any one last thing that you want to tell our listeners who are tuned in about the PFAC or about TGH or overall your story?
I would just say you never know what someone else is going through. And just by sharing like what you've been through or something, it might be minuscule to you, but you could literally be changing someone's life. I know the nursing staff and everyone that helped us from valet to security, like they were our family. They became our village. They still are today. But you don't realize that when you go to your job every day and you cross the bridge and go to TGH and you're in your routine, but that routine, you might be meeting someone at the worst time of their life and you become part of that story. So you do make a huge impact. And for me, I feel like it's the more we speak about it, if we can just help one person that maybe can't speak about it or one person that needed to hear that to know, hey, maybe I should look out for that or maybe be more aware of posters on the wall and not be like, oh, that'll never happen to me. I mean, if it helps one person by us speaking up, then that's all that really matters.
That's a good takeaway. Thank you, Kim, for that. Justin, any last minute?
I think my wife hit her perfectly right there. If one person can speak up from our story, I mean, that's all it takes and that's all that matters.
Well said. Well, thank you both, Kim and Justin, for coming onto the podcast. And for those tuning in, if you like these stories and want to continue listening, feel free to subscribe to the podcast. And you can learn more about our podcast at Voice of Experience pfac.com. And also follow us on all social media platforms at Voice of Experience PFAC. We're also live on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. So until next time, let's keep the conversation going.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Voices of Experience podcast. We hope you found the conversation enlightening and inspiring. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps others find our show and supports the incredible work of our Patient and Family Advisory Council. Stay connected with us on social media. You can find the PFAC podcast on social media at Voices of Experience PFAC. For more information about PFAC and how to get involved, visit our website by clicking the link in the show description. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going and continue to advocate for patient-centered care. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. I would love to hear your feedback. What did you love? What do you want to see more of? Are there any questions you would like me to ask the guests who come on the show? This show is not possible without you, the amazing listeners, so please email us at podcastsbylancy@gmail.com and let us know what you think. We'll also feature you on a later show. Please remember to subscribe to stay current with our amazing community of guests who will continue to come on the show, sprinkled in with solo episodes from me, Vincent A. Lancy. With that, I look forward to introducing more shows to you each and every week. And with that, we're signing off today. Enjoy the episodes and make it a great day ahead.